All right, so I'm back at the computer, and the reason being that I recently showed one of my students the Super Bowl halftime performance from 2014, where Bruno Mars plays a drum solo, and it kind of got me thinking and remembering how I felt like Bruno kind of got unfairly panned at the time. And of course, it's extremely common for folks these days to complain about Super Bowl halftime performances and compare them endlessly to Prince and Michael Jackson, etc. We'll leave that off the table. I really wanted to talk about specifically the drum solo and the drum performance, because I recall at the time drummers being sort of unimpressed or having a lot of sort of negative talk about this drum solo. And I wanted to go back and look at it and just explain why I think, at least, it's a great solo for the context that it's in, and why it's just a good thing for the drum community in general. But let's maybe just watch just a few seconds of it. Okay, so we're going to go back over that here, but first of all, let's just talk about the context and the fact that 1 minute, this is, by the way, a 1 minute drum solo, and that 1 minute of Super Bowl halftime, primetime space was taken up by a drum solo. So for me, I feel like almost anything that brings drums into the limelight and brings acoustic drums back into popular culture, how can that not be a good thing for our industry? I mean, people are still talking about the day that Ringo Starr and the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan in 1964 and how many drum sets that sold. So there can be these watershed moments that really bolster our industry. And again, if there's any moment that we can take to bring drums back into the limelight, I'd say Whiplash would be one of those as well. I've had lots of students talk to me specifically about Whiplash and how inspired they were by that movie. So things like that, regardless of how I might feel about performances or the way drums are depicted, I think there's something to be said for just having drums in popular culture. And specifically, like the Super Bowl in the US, at least, it doesn't really get any bigger than that. And I thought this was kind of a fun experiment. First of all, I was thinking about, okay, Super Bowl, how valuable is Super Bowl time? Because this is a full minute. And Super Bowl ads in 2014, I looked up, were going for around just over $4 million per 30 seconds. So we can say that the value of this drum solo monetarily, this was about an $8.5 million drum solo on primetime national US TV. So first of all, just the fact that that much time was dedicated to drums, that can't be understated, and we have to appreciate that. I also thought it was funny too, because Bruno is playing a DW drum set, and of course this is an insanely effective and useful, relatively free promo for DW. Now I looked this up. I don't know if this is true, but I had a couple different sources on DW's annual revenue, and this source here, funny enough, says that their annual revenue is $8.5 million, which would mean that the Super Bowl performance was the same value as their annual revenue. Now this seems kind of small to me, and there's another source here that said it's somewhere between $10 and $100 million, kind of a widespread. So I don't know what the truth is, but I just think it's funny that at least one source thinks that the Super Bowl performance was worth basically the same as DW's entire yearly revenue. Okay, so that's why it's hugely important just that he played the solo to begin with, and he really didn't have to. So let's go over what he actually plays. What does he choose to play? So let's go over this beginning section again. Okay, so he's setting up fairly basic patterns. I will totally grant that, which is fine. He's setting up these hits over the intro to one of his songs, to the song that he's going to play next. And he's leaving a lot of space. First of all, I mean, just listen to the sound of the drums. I mean, this is literally stadium rock. Like if you have an electronic drum set and you go to the stadium rock preset, like this is what it actually is. This is, a guy playing in a stadium. So it totally makes sense to leave all of this space and to just let the drums ring out and to create this tension and to start to set up this tension by just playing relatively simple hits over the intro to his next song. I think people were also maybe put off by his technique, kind of the way his arms are moving here. Kind of that his arms are going out and like, oh, that shows that, he's not using proper technique. I want to also point out that before we go any further, he's not playing this drum solo for drummers. Like, this drum solo is for the entire US audience. This is a drum solo for America. No, I'm just messing around, but like, he's playing a drum solo to a wide audience, and that's the whole point. So he's deliberately trying to move as much as possible and make it as showy and as exciting as possible, and just make hitting the drums seem exciting and fun, which hopefully we all agree it is. Now, I'll get on board that maybe his technique doesn't look perfect in this example, but it kind of misses the point. I don't really care. Like, it looks fun and it looks exciting, and that's the point. Okay, so we're building some tension here. Okay, so he plays a groove and some fills, and that was the other thing I felt like I heard people saying, like, yeah, he just played kind of like some basic grooves and fills. It's like, that's drumming. That's what drumming is. Drumming is just grooves and fills, right? And I don't think at all that this was the wrong choice. Like, yeah, again, it's a relatively simple groove, but it sounds good. Like, he's playing over this sample, and when you're playing to non-drummers, like, even things that we think are relatively simple, like, they're not simple to other people. Like, they sound cool. Like, it sounds interesting. It's still fresh. Like, that beat blew our minds at one point when we were learning drums, and when we first learned that beat, it was super exciting, super fun to play. Like, everyone else, all the non-drummers that are watching this solo, they're still in that mindset. So he doesn't necessarily need to play anything crazier. And also, I'll defend that fill. Like, I think that is a super solid fill. Like, it's kind of choppy. This fill coming up. Like, no, it's not an Eric Moore fill, but like, that's the kind of fill that, could get you fired in a lot of situations. Like, that's pretty choppy for general listening. You can also hear like he's doing some doubles on his right foot that he doesn't have to. Like, again, let's remember, this is Bruno Mars, like, extremely talented singer and songwriter, plays guitar as well, plays a variety of other instruments. Like, this is completely extraneous. Like, he doesn't need to prove himself in this way. That little embellishment in the groove there too. Wait. And then comes right in on that hit. And then right there, here's another thing I'll mention too. Like, they could easily have cut the solo here. Like, that was already 30 seconds, which is more than enough for this kind of performance. And a hit comes in, but they keep the solo going. He decides to extend it to be an entire minute. Like, solo could end right here. But no, we're still going. And then we kind of get into the song. So, no, this isn't a Tony Royster Jr. solo. No, this is not a Dave Weckl solo. But that's totally missing the point to make that comparison. Like, this is a giant pop star playing a drum solo at a massive, massive national media event. So, given that context, I actually quite like what he played. I really enjoyed it and thought that it was a good balance between playing what was within his wheelhouse, what he definitely had the vocabulary for, and what he played, he executed really, really well. So playing within his vocabulary and also kind of skirting the line between playing something super, super simple, which is like what he does in the beginning, and then just getting a little spicier, which is kind of what he does towards the middle and towards the end, and kind of catering to both audiences. One last thing I've heard people say is that Bruno's brother, who I believe is Eric Hernandez, is also his drummer in the band, and he's clearly a more experienced drummer. Like, he is specifically a drummer. Great player, and like maybe he should have played that drum solo. And I do get that point, and that is a little bit of a bummer. But honestly, I don't think producers and executives would let Bruno give the limelight to someone else, someone who's not him, for that long, for an entire minute playing a drum solo. So just kind of to sum things up, I feel like this was sort of a love letter to the drums, and that this was a good thing for the drum industry and the drum community. I thought it was, even just the solo itself, I thought was well plotted out, was well played, and didn't blow my mind, but I thought it was exactly what it needed to be for the Super Bowl. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And maybe if you didn't like it at the time, maybe you can kind of see it through a new lens, or maybe if you hadn't seen it before, maybe now, you've experienced it. So anyways, those are my thoughts on Bruno Mars playing drums. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.